But let me pray for us as we just have a conversation together after church. Lord, thanks for this time. Pray for those who are here that we're able to enter into a dialogue discussion about, on this day, about the property that the church owns over on Sliding Hill, and how we think about it, how we're trying to move forward, and see what you have for us in it. So we ask for your blessing in this time. In Jesus' name. Before we actually get to the plot update, Christy's going to give kind of a communication update first.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. I am speaking on behalf of the admin, and we have once again made some changes to texting. I'm really sorry. I hope this is the last time. So if you previously consented to texting and you were receiving texts from the phone number that's under the student ministry, you will receive an email at 11:30 asking you to reconsent. This is for men and women, adult men and women. You will be asked to reconsent to our new phone number. And then if you want to add that phone number to your contact list, it will, all texts for men's events and women's events and like church-wide text messages will be coming from that first phone number, 833-676-1592. If you were previously on the student ministry text list, either a student or an adult, you will continue to receive texts from the previous phone number, 833-893-2338. So you might feel like you're getting different phone numbers. You won't be getting more texts than before. The number of texts that you received previously is going to stay the same. It's just that we had to switch up how we were sending the texts to be economical, and our free option disappeared, and so we're trying to utilize part of the free option and also Planning Center for the other option. So if you'll go to the next slide, what I need from you is that at 11:30, when you get the email, you fill out this form. You put in your phone number, you say that you consent to receive text messages, and then you hit submit, and you're on for the new texting service. If you're a student, you don't have to do anything. You won't get the email. So adult men and adult women who were previously receiving texts will get them. If at this time you're like, oh, I haven't been receiving text messages about men's events or women's events, and I'm interested in being added to that list. I know some of you who have told me you're not receiving them. On Monday, this form will be in the weekly email, and so you can click on it to be added to the list. So then you will receive text messages about upcoming events about men's and women's ministry. So if you have questions about that, you can see me after the service. So thanks for your patience and support in this.
All right, good morning, everyone. First, thanks for sticking around to participate in today's Plot Town Hall, the first of hopefully several. Can we move on to the next slide, please? We're going to start today. I'll kick us off with basically a reintroduction of Plot. Don't know who was here last time. We did an introduction last month. I think it was January. Seems like a while ago. But want to reintroduce the team and just kind of level set in that fashion, and then we'll dig into what we've been working on, and then ultimately move to Q&A. So PLOT stands for Property Long-Term Outlook Team, okay? And our members are Ben Johnston, Keith Skolton, Pamela Rogers, Clint Dowda, Christy Vilhauer, and myself. And just for a little bit of background of how we all came together, Christy and Pamela are on staff, and again, most of you know this, but just in case you're newer here, Christy and Pamela are on staff and plugged into, obviously, women's and children's ministries as well as everything else. Keith is a civil engineer and was integral in the planning and development of our ministry house property that I think all of you are aware of. Ben Johnston is part of a construction group firm that is great in an advisory role to help us talk through things. And Clint and I have been on property and building teams 15 years. So we're just keeping the momentum. Experience. That's right. A lot of history. So the purpose of our group is really to help the church form a long-term vision for the property. And like we introduced last time, part of that is getting feedback from you guys, and again, keeping the lines of communication open. It's working with internal, external resources that are subject matter experts, certainly engaging with the leadership teams, the elders and the deacons for feedback and guidance, and then ultimately trying to create options, like what are our different avenues for the property, how does that fit the ministry, serve the community, all those things. So that is big picture, high level vision for the group. As a refresher, again, I think this is news everyone knows, but we do own 10 acres along Sliding Hill. So we're going to go into a little bit more of the mechanics of that with an aerial shot shortly. But let's first talk about the time we have here together. So we talked about communication. This is our first form of, I'll say, group meeting for this. And our goal is to get feedback and questions, okay? We're in the beginning stages, so we're not going to show you a finished building up on the screen. That's down the road. But today is really just to share what we've been doing in our several months as a team, and then garner feedback from you guys. We're going to talk through, can we jump forward 2 slides? We're going to talk through that, perfect. Talk through different areas of focus. So these are the areas that we as a group have been diving into first, and we're going to give updates on each of these 3. And what I would say is it's best if we can kind of present the information, at least we think it's best, present the information on all 3 topics, and then we'll open it up to Q&A for the group, and you guys can dig into questions on these, or if there's other things that are relevant to the property, certainly happy to field those as well. So I think we'll start there, and Christy and Pamela can update us on local churches.
Christy told me I had to talk. I think there's a slide on the visiting local churches. Yeah. So this past month, or in January, I guess, Christy and I spent a morning, went down to the Midlothian area and visited 3 different churches, really just to kind of get a picture of what different churches could look like. They were similar size to us. We visited Spring Run and Sycamore Pres, and then Crestwood ECO. One of those churches is in the middle. Spring Run's in the middle of a renovation right now, so that was kind of insightful for us to talk through with the office manager and the pastor there, what they're looking at doing. The other 2 churches are actually planning renovations in the next year. So that was just good information for us to be like, what did you wish you had done when you purchased or built this church first, and what are you renovating now? So really just getting feedback and options, and brought that kind of back so that we have that to go forward with now. We do plan on visiting other churches in the future as well, but that was kind of a good launching point, point for us. So anything you want to add?
Okay. We're going to, if we can go to the next slide, if you don't mind. Property assessment, and Keith is going to give us an update on that. And I don't know, do you want the aerial up during this? Is that best? Sure. Do we have the aerial shot of the land? All right, thank you.
This is an aerial view of our property currently. The Mission House is the lower one that we currently have developed. For those that don't know, we have recently completed the purchase of another additional 5 acres to the north of the Mission House, just up the page. So total, we have 10 acres currently. We're planning to do a pre-application meeting with the county to go over all the zoning codes. Our current parcel has a split zoning right now. We have a B1 zoning when we did the Mission House. The new parcel is an A1 zoning, so we're going to meet with the county to discuss what impacts that may have, whether we'd have to do a rezoning on the new parcel or if we can keep the current zoning. Both parcels for a church use is not by right. We'd have to do a conditional use permit, which is the same process we went through with the Mission House in the past. So it's a fairly easy process that we went through last time. we didn't have much neighborhood angst on what we were doing, so on that. Across Sliding Hill is the airport. So there is an airport overlay district on our parcels. What that entails is, because we're at the end of the runways, there's slope restrictions for the airplanes coming in, landing, and taking off. Those restrictions at our properties is basically at the Mission House, the slope restriction. We can't have anything over 40 feet in height. As we go farther to the east on our property, that slope restriction increases in height. So by the time you get to what we call the rear of the property, it's about 150 feet up in the air. So while there is a restriction on the property, I don't anticipate us having any concerns with that because of the height that we're already at when it gets to our property. We also have done some research on utilities availability. Currently, there's an existing sanitary line in Sliding Hill Road that's on our side of the road, so that's a good thing. Easy connection. There's actually a manhole that's just north of our driveway that we can connect to, so that's wonderful. Water, however, is on the opposite side of Sliding Hill from us. The airport side, there's a 16-inch water main over there. So any kind of development we do, we'd have to bring the water across Sliding Hill to our side. So we'll be meeting with the county on the feasibility of that and what restrictions we'd have, because Sliding Hill is a 4-lane road, and we just can't open cut it or trench across it easily between VDOT and the county. So we're going to meet with them to discuss that. Let's see, what else was there? As you can tell, most of the properties is wooded, so that's a good thing for us. It'll help with any kind of buffer requirements when we go through the conditional use permit process. So that's about it.
Thanks, Keith. As you can tell, Keith knows a lot more about this stuff than probably most of us do in terms of the mechanical and technical aspects of development, so a huge help. And then the third thing we wanted to update on is our engagement with architects. If you don't mind going forward, thank you. So we've met with 2 architects recently, names that were suggested to us as folks with a presence in Richmond, a lot of experience in building and guiding church builds. And really the process was information gathering. This was learning about the process that they work through as part of working with a church, learning about the things we need to figure out and try to define for them as part of the process. It was an opportunity to learn about past builds that they've done or guided over the many years. Super helpful, truthfully, just to kind of talk the process with them. And it started at, the first thing it said is program management or program development, right? And which is a new phrase to me, and that's basically going through defining what does the church need in terms of space, in terms of function, growth expectations. Obviously we want something that would be scalable. So just trying to talk through that with them and understand what the process is really helpful. We didn't talk through costs per se, which I know will be a topic along the way, obviously a very important one. Very general in the beginning, really just to get to know them. And truthfully, it's an interview process for us as well. If we want to engage, formally with these groups, this is the first step, is really getting to know them and learn how they work. One of the things that we do want to highlight is, again, there were no costs associated with these meetings. These were preliminary information gathering, introductory meetings. We had not met with these folks before. So really, partially an interview, if you will, but partially also us just learning the process and taking advantage of their willingness to spend some time with us. Anything else on the architects that we should mention? Yeah. One of the things that was really helpful was they could show us visuals, right? I think that's going to help us down the road, right? Getting visuals on what the options might be, and them showing renderings drawings, different ways to represent the projects they've done was very helpful. And hopefully we'll be at that point, down the road as well. Yes. Yeah. So the programming that I had mentioned, thank you, Christy, help working with them to define what the needs of the church are, to give them a starting point for the design exercise, is in large part us working with you guys to understand certain needs, wants. Obviously, the staff and leadership, can get us, down the road to a certain point, but that's where a lot of interaction with the group here is going to be very important. Just understand, what people's visions or ideas are that we can blend in will be very helpful. So, okay, so we're going to move to Q&A, and I'll preface it in these ways. Just a couple notes. We have a microphone up here on the stand, so we are being recorded for folks that aren't here. So it's just helpful for people to speak into a mic so that is heard both in the room, but also for folks that are listening later. And we're going to try to stick with the mics as well. If you have a question or comment that you don't want to share, that's fine too. Not everybody likes this setting. Feel free to reach out to one of us directly, email, phone, text, however that is, and then we'll bring it back to the group and make sure that that's recorded as well. Our goal is to obviously record what's coming out of here so that we can process that, dig into certain topics if we need to. Certainly if we can give answers today, our hope would be that we will do that. But I will say this, there's a good chance we can't answer all your questions, so we are going to politely decline to answer that question potentially, but we will record it. We're very much in the beginning stages of what we're learning. So if you have questions that are for today or even for the future, that's fine. Feel free to fire them at us, but we might just record that and say, hey, that's for a future session if that's okay. So that is the plan. So again, instead of passing a mic around and run around the room, we're going to ask if folks have questions to please walk up and then speak into the mic. The floor is open.
All right.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Is it on? I'll find out.
I think it's on.
Have you been looking at feasibility study as a part of your work in consideration with the architect, or just as a part of the process of what this may look like?
Yeah, as part of what we're doing, we are looking at what the county would require, what, like I said, the utility availability. So all of that is part of what we'd have as a feasibility study, or in conjunction with the programming of any kind of church facility. So yes, we are going to be doing that.
And I think there's feasibility as it relates to the property and then also the financial, right? So that'll be part of it as well, is trying to figure out the scale of perhaps an investment that may make sense, for Grace. So, and then figuring out what that looks like feasibility-wise, financially. Other questions? Thank you, Dave.
I'm curious if you've been anticipating traffic control, the needs for controlling particularly left turns in and out of the property in the future.
Yes, we will be meeting with VDOT. One of the things I do anticipate, if we can put the aerial back up, is currently, if you've been to the Mission House, we do not align with the median brake. You basically have to do a turning maneuver into the turn lane and then a UE if you want to head southbound again. Any kind of development we do for this, I anticipate VDOT requiring us to realign our driveway to that median brake, which would allow the full lefts out of our any kind of facility.
I'm just thinking that when we're meeting as a church there, that the volume of traffic will be considerable, you know. And whether, like, one thing that churches do is hire a policeman or somebody to do traffic. Just thoughts.
So I anticipate once we go through design development and site plan, VDOT would require us to do a traffic impact assessment. And at that time, we determine vehicle per hours, vehicle per days, what our peak is, and how that relates to the traffic along Sliding Hill. I know Wegmans is just down the road from us, so that obviously includes tractor-trailer traffic in there. So as part of that design development, we would do a traffic impact study to see what kind of scenario we have.
So one of the things we've been talking about, come on up, Jim. One of the things we've been talking about with the architect is just phasing, right? So, you know, it's very easy to define everything we want and we could ever dream about in a property, in a building, and the numbers can grow pretty quickly, right? So one of the things we know as part of the process is defining maybe what would be the dream property, and then start making choices, right? And part of that's phasing, where, you know, there are strategic ways that a base building might be there, and then you can add to it, or you can repurpose a space. And that's very much part of this process that we would talk through with the architect, whoever we might select down the road. But that wouldn't be in the beginning. The beginning is really this whole programming development phase, where we start defining what is our church need. And that's everything from what we think of today, and the architects were fantastic because they're introducing other ideas. They're like, you know, some churches want to have a food pantry, or some churches want to have this form of ministry, or this form of ministry, you know, a gym, whatever that is. There's all kinds of things that can be thrown out into the list of ideas. And we want to, truthfully, my opinion, not speaking on behalf of the team, my opinion is think big, right? Start big. Like, what would be fantastic in terms of serving the body, serving the community, and then bring it down into maybe a more attainable spot. So just a little more food for thought. Go, Jim.
Be a question or two questions for Keith again. The conditional use permit, is that permanent once, if we get approved, we get it, or is that something you might have to defend again later?
No, the conditional use permit is permanent. It will go with the property. However, if we make changes to the property, we'd have to go back for a new conditional use permit.
Second question is, how long is the neighbor still renting back, and how long does that last? And is it worth doing any improvements while they're still there? That's the last question.
Yeah, so for those that didn't know, the previous homeowner on the new property stayed in the home and rented back for 4 months, three months, a handful of months through the end of the year. So that at the end of the year ended, and then she moved out. So that home at this point is not being used, so it's empty. We're brainstorming ways that can be used, and all of this kind of rolls up into the same conversation of, you know, obviously we're thinking long term, you know, how could the property be used, but then also shorter term, how can this house be used? You know, when we bought the first property, I think it was pretty clear the goal was to create this ministry house, which has been fantastic, you know, and joint offices, events, meeting space, and that's worked out really well. With the second purchase, it was more focused on the land, really, because building on a very, very narrow 5 acres, it wasn't necessarily going to be easy to do. Don't worry, Keith had some ideas up his sleeve that we looked at years ago, but more options, just better footprint to get the adjacent property. So part of this whole group effort is to try to figure out not only long-term what it might look like, but also short-term, how can that other home be used for us?
What is the timeline? So you said long-term and phases. So is there kind of things put in place as far as the timeline?
Thank you, Robin. I would say this, timeline-wise, we don't have a timeline laid out. Our hope would be that by the end of the year, well, I'm gonna go back a step. Our plan coming out of here is to meet with the elders and deacons in March to share what we know today, share what we learned between now and then, and get a little more guidance, okay? Because we can go pretty, move with pace early to try to define a lot of things, including a timeline, and then, or we can pump the brakes a little bit and say, hey, we're gonna wait till certain funds are built up and other things as well. So we don't have a specific timeline. I think our goal is to try to create that this year where we kind of have some ideas, we can understand some scale of what building and investments might be, and then what the timeline is. I think that, you know, there's probably gonna be several timelines. One, what the new house, you know, what are we doing there? But also then, what are we gonna do on the property long term? And I know it's not a great answer, and I'm sorry, but we're trying to figure that out. And a lot of it comes back to the investment, right? If we say, hey, this is what would best serve Grace community and the county, and this is what it costs, then we have to figure out, okay, what is the timeline associated with that? And certainly we're not there quite yet. Anything to add?
And we have we might do another meeting, but we know May 17th is our typical, we'll call it another town hall, but typically we do a budget update for the fiscal year. So we would anticipate bringing another update as part of that at that May 17th meeting. But we're gonna be working between then and now. And the March 16th meeting is kind of update for the elders and probably give some direction, defining direction to this team more. So we're not a rogue team, just kind of working.
Hello. So my question, and thank you all for forming this team and for the work that you've already done, because I know you all already do lots of other things, and this is part-time in addition to that. But thinking along that vein, when we did the ministry house, I know we consulted with, I can't remember his name, but a guy that had experience with like capital campaigns and kind of like what that looks like and how you approach that. I feel like with all of this, there's a lot of moving parts potentially for like help with like project management, help with somebody who has experience with capital campaign and how you go about that. When you get to those phases, are you thinking it would be helpful to have some outside consultants or resources that are shepherding you in that process or on that path?
Okay, I'll try to take a stab at that. Good question. I think that's probably out of the scope of this particular team. This team's work might end with sort of that along, if we engage further with an architect, like some of those costs and construction costs, Ben would be helpful with, might come out, yes. And then it would be, I think, a determination of the elders and deacons how to move forward, like to a campaign. I think if we were, certainly if and when we do a campaign, we would probably, it would be, you know, without even knowing the architect's numbers, it would be a large campaign. So we would probably consult with someone that we did before. For those who are newer to the church, we had a person who helped with sort of the first campaign. So not the second house, but when we did the ministry house, we had a campaign, if you remember, and someone helped that team with running that campaign. I would imagine a future building campaign of this scale, we would do the same thing, but we haven't determined that. I think this team's job in some ways is to get to that spot to go, hey, this is what you could do. This is some of the timelines you could use. We can accomplish a lot without an architect honestly, because Keith's on this team, as far as the suitability of the land itself. The county is very helpful. We've already gone through that process, and Keith alluded to that. We'll do that in March or April it's not a CUP approval, correct me, Keith, if I'm misspeak here. They do give pretty good indication of these are the things we think you'd have to take into consideration. So we would kind of know that, we'd kind of know the land. The architect, if we engage with an architect, we'd have a lot better idea of a building and a vision for that. But we haven't gotten to that. That's why we want to kind of check back in with the elders and deacons, and we'll give that update, and that would inform more of the scope of our work for the rest of the year. Probably getting us to what you're talking about, Aaron, I think.
One thing to quickly add to that, when we did the ministry house property, and many of you were over at the house working on the weekends and nights. I mean, it was a full congregation effort. It was a balance of internal volunteerism as well as hiring some key resources to do work. And so, even past this initial phase where we're talking about some of the financial side, when we talk about execution, this project is going to be significantly larger than the ministry house exercise. I mean, just look at the amount of trees on that property, for example, right? Because we were dropping trees ourselves with key help from capable folks, and the less experience you had, the further you stood from the tree. I think that was the rule. So we're going to have to do the same thing here, is figure out, okay, where can we kind of take on some of this through volunteering, and honestly, it's a great experience to do these things together, and then also, where do we plug in experts? And we're going to need a lot of professionals, I think, to do something. I think that goes without saying. So, and Keith is fantastic, and Ben is as well, advising us in terms of just what they know, this part of their professional expertise, part of the process. But at some point, again, it just gets bigger. It's like, okay, we need to engage a company now to do certain things, and we will talk throughout this process of when those pivot points have to happen.
So, I mean, there's probably lots of different ways that decision-making could be organized. So I'm asking, is this the way it's going to be? And you can tell me, no, it's going to be some other way. So in the space that we've been in, right, it's like a multi-purpose use, right? Facility, building, whatever. Do you envision kind of consulting with the architect, planning like a couple of different options and presenting them to the congregation? Or is that what the elder and deacon team would be evaluating, and then the congregation would just kind of get one thumbs up, thumbs down vote on one option? Because I could see traditional sanctuary plus some multi-purpose, only multi-purpose, what's that gonna look like?
You got the mic.
Good question, Tyler.
I mean, I think financially, the feasibility of it, what Mike was talking about earlier with the phasing, a lot of the churches that were built by the architects we met with, initially start with a multi-purpose one space, and then there are options later to have a more permanent sanctuary with turning that multi-purpose space into a fellowship hall. So there's lots of those things. But yes, we do plan on presenting some options or at least asking questions about what's important to the congregation and getting feedback from some sort of survey at some point when we're ready for that.
And also in conjunction with that, even the existing property we have. So it might be easier to get to a phase if we utilize the ministry house that we have, right, for youth space continuing and office space even. So that's, I think, the thing that the architect, if we went down that road, would probably help with, and that is, it would come under this team serving on behalf of the church and the elders and deacons to figure that out, to engage the congregation. You have a follow-up, looks like?
I was just going to ask, looking at this aerial view, should we be hosting the firewood ministry for a while?
Great question. So on the topic of phasing and the architect, so I don't know if I said it before, we have asked for price proposals from the architect for this initial phase, just to understand what the cost is. And the outcome of this is not only the development of the program that we mentioned earlier, but it would also be renderings, and again, this is not on paper yet, but our expectation is coming out of this, what we would term initial phase, which would have a cost to it, would be renderings and ideas and things that we could evaluate as a group, share if appropriate with the larger group, if they seemed viable. But again, it's we're going to look for the elders and deacons to give us some guidance, as well as obviously some feedback from today on how fast do we move on that front. But that would be based on what we understand an initial phase when we're ready to take that on.
Thanks for all the great work you're doing. Can you remind us what the amount of the loan is and the payback term for that? And has thought been given to whether the payback of that loan will be a separate offering that the congregation will be asked to consider?
You talking about this future project or past?
The note that for the purchase of the property that was a few months ago.
Okay. Yeah, that we have used, that's paid for. So we don't have a loan on that. We used general fund surpluses. So our building fund got down to zero. I think the deacons did just also from general fund surplus, put maybe $35,000. I think there's $40,000 in that account. But that, a year or two ago, that was our general fund was pretty robust and our building fund was, so those are down kind of. The general fund's fine, and the finance team we have 3 months of general fund reserve in our general fund. That's kind of the stated goal from the finance team, and we have a little bit in the building fund. We don't have any debt on anything now. And then some money still is coming back in from pledges. I think there's maybe that second pledge, which was not a big campaign, as Aaron was talking about. The first one was a big campaign. The second one was just, hey, we have this gap. We're going to use some surplus money, it was a kind of informal campaign. I think there's still about, Melissa could correct me, maybe $15,000 to $20,000 that's pledged that should come back into the building fund. In the next year or so. Right. You are welcome to give to the building fund at any time. And honestly, part of this goal of the plot is we want to value the congregation's stewardship, and we want to be able to speak back, give some sense of buildability of the bigger church building, even if it's down the road, and architect could give more if we want to go that route, so that we could sort of present that to the congregation. And that's something that I think overall the plot team, depending on that meeting in March, that's probably a year-long process to really give a fuller picture if we want to go at that speed that Mike was talking about. So we've done a lot, actually. We've met a lot in the first 2 months, but it just takes time with volunteers and with engaging different people and in the county and stuff like that. So we don't have any debt. That's Ann's question. What we anticipate this project to be significantly more in terms of cost. Reed.
Great. Guys, I just want to thank you all for all the work that you're doing. We really appreciate that as a congregation. Keith, question for you. On the water, is it possible for the water to come from Milestone on the back half of the property?
I don't believe so. When we met on the Mission House, when we developed that site, the water and the size of the main that we need is coming from Sliding Hill. It would be a significant cost to try to get to that same size main in Milestone.
Okay. The second question I have, and guys, we've been blessed by God to give us the abundance to be able to do this debt-free. We do need to rebuild some of those reserves, without a doubt. But also looking at the property, we have a plot to the south and a plot to the north. We have a great God that we worship, and he may provide other opportunities for us. As you look at that, is there any thoughts about growing the property size at this time?
Not from this team. And Keith might be able to take a little bit to this, but I think the overall thought of this team is that this land is probably buildable and ample for even like a big picture kind of dream of what we might do. So that's just my thought, but I don't think that's come up. You're giving us new things to think about, Reed. Keith, would you say that too, as far as like the space now as opposed to, because when we did buy this, we did talk to Keith the first time, the ministry house, it was buildable, but it was going to be a little wonky buildable long-term.
Yeah, 5 acres was tight with just the Mission House parcel. Now that we've expanded to the 10, that opens the door to basically anything we want to do for the church. There hasn't been any discussions, at least in our committee, regarding purchases to the north or south at this time for that. I don't see the need unless the church wants to do, like, say, athletic fields or some other kind of ministry that we don't have currently right now.
Great, thank you. And then the last question that I have, the property, the building on the front, obviously you guys are just in the beginning stages of deciding what to do with it, but just some thoughts on where you guys are thinking about either utilizing that or because of the right-of-way to the property to the north, how that might be impacted on that particular building. Is there any thoughts there or any insight that you guys can share?
We haven't had any discussions on the use of the new house at this time. We're open to ideas, so anybody that wants to share anything or here's a use that we'd like to see, I mean, it's, I believe, part of what we're looking into. Regarding the shared use, yes, there is a shared use driveway on the north side of the new property. It's shared, is the main driveway for the new house, but it is also the driveway for the house just to the north of us, from north of the new house. Currently, I don't have plans on closing that. I would anticipate keeping that driveway. Ultimately, it'd be up to VDOT if we do develop and we do put in new entrance at the median break, whether VDOT would require us to close that driveway in addition to our current driveway. So,
Yeah, and I think that as we understand it, we can check in with elders and deacons. This team is trying to say where we could build and maybe what a building might look like, maybe some options on where that, let's just say that the biggest building, where that would go on those 10 acres. And that does indirectly impact the house that's there. But I think that's more our role, and then it's to probably the elders and deacons to figure out, okay, based on the feedback of this team, what does that mean? Like, VDOT said it would have to, it is in where the new road would likely have to go is in direct line with the house, but it could potentially be diverted around. And but I think our team's goal is to say these are the options, these are the best places we recommend where a building would go, and then that impacts what happens to that house. But we didn't think it was our role to say what to do with that house. It's more, can it stay? If it can stay, these are the options, and then the elders and deacons and the rest of the church might decide. It'd be another committee, I think, that would decide what, among good options, if it's staying, what could we possibly do with it?
Even in the short term, like, realistically, we may not build for a while. And so even if it has to go eventually, there are uses that we could consider short term. But again, we've mentioned that, but this committee is not really going into depth on what that would look like. So, but definitely something for us to consider as a church.
Yeah, and it depends how detailed we get in our planning, I think helps define the use in the short term, which short term could be several years, as Pamela said, of that house.
So the only question I have in addition to that is, if you can't hear me, I'm not sure. Yeah, all right. Is how does the congregation get that information to the deacons and elders, for the ideas?
Share them. I think. Yeah, I'd say. Mike Holler. You give them to Mike Holler. You give those ideas to Mike Holler in the interim. If you have ideas about how, if that house is staying short term, long term, how you'd like to be used, and Mike will coordinate with the elders and deacons. Mike and I are looking at each other, and he flinched first. That was nice of him.
So one thing I want to say is we have been intentionally looking long term. but we're super sensitive to the short-term possibilities with the house, right? So what we're trying to not do is do something too quickly in the short term that impacts us long-term or is a setback in any way. So just trying to be very intentional. You know, the house has been empty, I think, for 6 weeks, right? So it's still new, but we're just trying to be intentional with our steps there before deciding anything.
Hi, guys. So based on what you said with the house being empty for 6 weeks, and it's a different zone, so it's not a business yet, and I know that we've had some, like we couldn't do stuff at the ministry house until it was a business, and we can't do anything there until it is a business. Is someone still checking on the house to make sure it's okay while it sits empty and it's not flooding or exploded? Or I know that probably the utilities are off, but is there somebody like checking on it, or is there anything that can happen since it's not in that zone for church?
Yeah. So the deacons are responsible for the properties as a whole, plus the 2 homes, the ministry house and the new home. So specifically, Sean and Ed, Sean Labadie, Ed Buchanan, are checking on them regularly through all the winter events that we've had, making sure everything is safe and sound. Obviously, we had some pipe issues at the ministry house. The other home was fine, but yeah, they are actively being taken care of.
And they obviously do that for the ministry house too. The utilities actually are on because we don't want it to like get too cold in there. And they're also open. I think Joe Sanders and Brad Fairbanks are going to help long term on kind of maintenance of our properties. So if anybody's interested in joining the deacons in that, you don't have to be a deacon to help keep the house in either house in good shape. They would welcome that as well. Any other questions? Can certainly take questions one-on-one too, but those are helpful, I think, for us to hear as a team as we move forward, kind of the things that naturally come up. All right, here we go, Caleb.
So when talking about the building, are we thinking that the building would just be in like the northern property or like in both the properties at the same time?
At this time, we don't know. One of the things we need to do is get through all this information gathering with the county, find out what all the restrictions are. We also want to get through the programming phase where we talk with the architect, talk with the congregation more, what missions and services we want to have on our property. Once the architect knows what that is and kind of can decide on how much space, like how much worship space, how many classrooms, offices for any kind of building, then we can take that information and then place it on the parcel and then figure out the supporting activities from the site side of how many parking spaces do we need, what are the utility sizes we'd have to bring in. The larger the building, the greater the fire protection, the greater the water lines I have to bring into the site. So it's all keyed off of kind of these steps of information gathering, the programming, and then we can start laying out concepts and schematics of how all this would fit on the property.
All right, any other questions? Next steps. So we have one last slide. So next steps. We'll meet again. We'll have our fourth. We met 3 times already. We'll meet our fourth and kind of debrief great things that you guys shared here, or any other private conversations or emails that come our way. As Mike mentioned, in mid-March, the elders and deacons will meet and kind of we'll update more and sort of say, hey, this is what we think, this is what we found, this is directions we could go, kind of get to a place of, okay, move forward, and we'll give an update from there. Somewhere in, Keith's working on getting us a pre-application meeting with the county that we mentioned a couple times today. That's probably a March, early April thing. And then, as I mentioned earlier, at least this, May 17th is our last Sunday community before the summer. And that has traditionally been a budget update for just the general budget, fiscal update. But there's usually space in that time after that for other things. And we anticipate giving another update May 17th on where we are, kind of like this. So, because it's February. So I think that's good. Let me pray to end our time. And then if you guys want to help the setup team by doing chairs, they will probably appreciate that. So, Lord, thanks for this time and the great questions and insight. We thank you that the congregation that cares, congregations that's actively involved. We are, as was mentioned by, I think, Reed this morning, we are aware of your graciousness to us and the long-term search for the first property, and then just out of being neighborly and neighbor liking us, opportunity to purchase this other plot of land, which really enables us to really envision a building, long-term worship space. We're grateful, of course, for this county, this space here at Oak Knoll, which is newer to us, and that we have this space until we get to there. But we want to be there. We want that to happen. We want to be for our own congregation and for our wider community to be able to do ministry in fuller ways on that property. So we're grateful for having it, and pray for this team and our congregation and steps forward from here on. In Jesus' name, amen.